Hello. All right, we are live on social. We're live on Zoom. We'll give people a couple minutes to roll in as we have been. So anyone who wants to pop a note in the chat about any revelation, observation, anything that may have been happening, maybe since yesterday, maybe since the day before, anything new? It's always like a slow start to a workshop. But
something.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So this, since when I arrived here on Monday, I just kind of had like an idea of what I wanted to do, but just being here has been like super inspiring and like getting me really excited about the project. And so I reached out to someone who recently published a book or had her book published. And I asked like, so what was the first thing you did? Like, how did you really get this thing going? And she shared, I guess there's like a proposal thing that you put together that's what you kind of farm out to the potential publishers. And that's how you start to pitch your book. I didn't know anything about that. I'm very new to this space. Anyway, so like she told me what's in it, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be easy, but like, I feel like I have probably about a good chunk of it in my head already. And I'm excited about that. And even yesterday's writing exercise was quite helpful. I was like yelling at myself in part of the writing exercise. I'm like, that's boring. No one wants to hear about that. Like, what are you really going to write about? And I was like, okay, this is what I really want to write about. So anyway, that's another story.
That is hilarious. I love that. I am dropping in the chat, which will be beneficial for you. It's a sample chapter of 11 from the Publisher Purpose book. And this is for anybody that talks about your publishing needs, wants, and desires. And what that does is it'll help you identify what publishing path makes sense for you. Because what publishing path you're talking about is going a traditional publishing route, which is where you need a book proposal, you need an agent. It takes multiple years if you even get a yes. And so it's a much different process than self-publishing or hybrid publishing, for example. We also have a webinar, which Nikki, I don't know if you can grab that with ease from our website that actually talks about in really deep detail the pros and cons of each of those publishing paths. So that might be that way you can kind of like be empowered now to kind of know what direction you want to head in later.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think that would be a very good resource.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah. And you're right. She did go through a very traditional route. She went through Wiley, I think. And yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And Wiley's a great publisher. Yeah. It's one of those things that every author's path looks a little bit different. And it's a matter of finding the one that makes the most sense for you personally. And I think, it's hard because once you start talking to people, you start getting a lot of conflicting information. So our webinar, I feel like, should be a nice, it's also covered in the book too, just in a much more succinct way, but you're welcome to consume it in whatever way feels good for you.
Jen, your camera is off, which I think you were unaware of since you normally.
Sure was. I'm back. Thank you. I don't know.
Hello.
Love it. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, don't know where my camera went, but as everyone who's been here all week knows that the tech issues are just, compounding. So we should be fine today. We're putting good positive vibes out here in the universe. We'll start in a minute, but yeah, if you want to just put in the chat who you are, what you're writing about, where you're calling in from. Again, just to continue to create this community. I love that there's been some kind of synergy between some of what you were up to and some side conversations happening and things like that. Because as you are starting to see, or probably knew already, is that this, in a lot of ways, it does take kind of a village to get a book out the door. And so tomorrow we will talk about support systems specifically and what you need, what type of resources are going to be helpful for you, coming up with contingency plans and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So that'll be tomorrow. But today we're focusing on your actual plan. And so we had homework yesterday. So who did the homework? Yes. Yes. Okay.
Nice.
At least the faces I can see are saying yes. This is amazing. Okay, it's awesome.
I did part 2.
You did.
Great.
I love it. So breeze through it. You're like, I don't need this. I'm good to go. Anyone else? Awesome. Love it. Beautiful. All right. Good. And Melanie, it's nice to see your face. I'm glad you're here too. Love it. All right. So please, for those who did the homework, please drop your number into the chat if you do not mind. And remember, we're not comparing. This is not a race.
Number?
Yep, your word count number, your 30-minute word count number that you did for your homework yesterday. If you were not able to do that, totally fine. We will have an example and we'll go through.
I wrote a table of contents.
That's amazing. That's really awesome.
Like, I think I misunderstood the homework.
Yeah, you're okay. I'll have an example. We'll be able to go through. Sherry, handwritten. That's brave. Good for you.
Nice.
All right. This is amazing. Okay, good. So we got some numbers coming in. And you'll see that the numbers vary dramatically. And that's 100% okay. It's just kind of part of the process. It's a matter of focusing on what we can do, not what someone else can do. Because I think a lot of times, especially in writing a book, we do ask other people that we know who are in the process or people who've done it. We ask for what their best practices were, or, really kind of like just what notoriously worked for them. And that may not work for us. Or they might say, yeah, I was able to crank out 3,000 words in an hour. And you're like, wow, I was able to do 600. So we don't want to get into a place of wanting to compare ourselves against what someone else is doing. It definitely can be problematic and defeating. And ultimately, the goal is for you to get this done, not to be in a race with somebody else that has nothing to do with what you're doing. But unfortunately, I feel like sometimes our human behavior tends toward the competitive side of things. So for those who just kind of popped on, we're just dropping in the chat what our word count number was from yesterday for our 30-minute free writing exercise. And then we're going to put this all into a formula.
And Anthony made a comment that he's not sure how long his book will be. And a little further along today, we'll discuss some of the averages based on fiction and nonfiction. So hopefully that will help as you set your goals.
Yes. Yep. That is all part of today, because you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I have no idea what direction I'm going in. We're going to cover all that today. So we're going to get a plan in shape. Yes, Nikki, if there's other questions that I missed, please feel free to just pop in. Oh, Nikki, you're getting compliments on your glasses.
Thank you so much. They're new. This has been a good week for me. I'm going to get glasses every week and just fish for compliments all day, every day.
The way to do it. Self-care. We'll just put that under the bucket of self-care. All right. So yesterday's book winner. And again, same thing today. We're still giving one away today. We're giving another away tomorrow. There's 5 in total. Is Hey, you did it. Holla. Love it, love it, love it. All right. So you are today's winner. I love it. So we have 2 more opportunities. So anyone who has not yet won, please, by all means, throw it into the Google form that Nikki is dropping into the chat. You can do that at any point between now and when we end today. My screen is frozen, but I'm still able to move through my slides, but they are not allowing me to click individually. So I'm just going to hold a second, because this is just a recap, so it's not as important, but I don't want to get into a position where I'm just throwing everything on the screen at you at once, because I think it'll be overwhelming. So if you can just bear with me while I deal with the technological woes. I just think our 2 programs, Zoom and StreamYard, I think those 2 programs don't like each other, because my computer is fine otherwise. It just seems to be where we're seeing some problems.
You want me to share the slides?
I think I'm going to be able to do it. We shall find out in just a moment.
All right.
It's just one of those things that's, we gotta roll with technology, because it's really just not my friend this week. Let's see if I grab the right one. I did not. Okay. All right. I feel like we need like some kind of Jeopardy music, some kind of like song and dance happening while I'm solving tech problems.
I could perhaps put some.
Oh, perfect. Yes, this is great.
If anybody wants to dance,
I love this. Fantastic. I mean, this is great. Okay. Almost there. That is awesome. And I am almost there, I promise. For those watching on social, they're gonna be like, wow, there's a lot happening right now because I'm advancing through all the slides from the last 3 days. Okay. Okay. Share my screen. Let's see if this works. I don't know that we're gonna work. All right. All right, can we see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
All right, we're back. Thank you for the music in the background. That was a nice little change of pace. I like it. All right, so we know that you did your writing yesterday, so that is half the battle. Let me just get back over here. Perfect. Okay, we're in business. Good grief. Okay. So your number that you put into the chat just a moment ago, we're going to do some math here. So highly recommend either using the workbook or grabbing a piece of paper. And this is not complicated math in any way, shape, or form, I promise. But this is an actual exercise that we want to work through together. There'll be a little bit of educational kind of pieces along the way. So it's a 6-step process. I can't see the rest of my slides now, so I'm just going to have to wing it here with me. But we got 6 steps. So first, we just need to know how many words we wrote in that 30 minutes. So the example I'm using is 500. I'm trying to keep it real, clean, easy numbers. So if you weren't able to do this yesterday as part of the homework, just use the example and just make a note to come back, watch the replay, or remember kind of how we did this and then come back and be able to populate this for yourself tomorrow. Okay, so we're just writing the number in the workbook. Not super complicated, not getting too crazy here. Just gonna write this number in the workbook. Oh my God, it's not advancing. Why? Okay, here we go. Good grief. Okay, very simple here. We're just gonna multiply this number by 2. That is all we are doing right now. We're keeping it very simple. And again, this is on purpose. Okay, so we're just gonna keep it simple, multiply our number by 2, and we're gonna write this down in the workbook too. So now our example is we're going from 500 to 1,000. Nothing super earth-shattering here about the numbers. Everyone's following along, I assume. We're in good shape. Okay. All right. Now, when we get into step 3, this is where there's a little bit of education. This is where everyone's going to kind of veer off into different directions. So step 3 is that we want to pick a target goal for how long we want our manuscript to be. Now, you might have absolutely no idea what this means, which means you're in good company because no one does. So for a nonfiction book, the range of which, let me put the caveat here, your book could really be any size. It could be as short as you want, as long as you want. These are just kind of general ranges to kind of think about keeping your book within. So a nonfiction book, somewhere between 25,000, 60,000, somewhere in that range of words. That is anywhere between 100 pages and like 350, 400 pages. It's a wide range. So 110 to 250 pages. Memoirs. So for those working on memoirs, about 50 to 90,000. Memoirs tends to be an environment where memoirs can be longer because people are there for pleasure. Nonfiction book, you're solving a problem. Memoirs are for pleasure and or to learn. Obviously, like there's a lot of kind of overlap for sure between these two things. But when we're looking at this, memoirs, you can get away with writing more. So if yours is beyond 90,000 words, you're totally okay. We have a number of books that are significantly beyond the 90,000 mark. And because it's a memoir, it works. So just generally speaking, you don't have to know exactly, but just pick a target. The keyword here is a target. This is not for you to be beholden to. This is not for you to say, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I hit this exact number. This is just to get you in a general direction. You might start this process and say, I'm going to aim for 40,000 words. And then all of a sudden it's 80,000. or I'm going to aim for 40,000 and it's actually 20,000. It can go in both directions. There's no right or wrong. It is just to give you a guidepost. I don't want to mispronounce your name, but I see your hand raised. Could you please pronounce it for me when you pop on?
Arnella.
Arnella. Okay, perfect. Yes.
So my question is, when you say this range of pages, how big are these pages? Are they A4 format or?
Love this question. Beautiful question. And I'm going to have to add this to the presentation. Okay, so this is based on a standard nonfiction book size is a 5.5 by 8.5. So it's kind of like half of a sheet of paper is kind of the easiest way to kind of think about it. A standard memoir size is a 6 by 9, so just a little bit bigger. With this being said, you can have a memoir that's 5.5 by 8.5, and you can have a nonfiction book that's 6 by 9. You can also have them as 5 by 8s. You can have them as 7 by 10s. The options are endless. There's so many different different paths that you could choose here. But generally speaking, 5.5 by 8.5 and 6 by 9. So if you go to just a bookstore, look at your bookshelves at home, any kind of nonfiction book or memoir, they're going to be generally the same size. But that is a great question because yes, these numbers would look very different if it were an A4, which is more like an 8.5, like a standard sheet of paper size. Not exactly those dimensions, but pretty close. Beautiful question, thank you. And I'm going to make sure I add this for future conversations. So does everyone have kind of a target that they're kind of aiming for here? Anything in particular that they're going for? And please just drop it in the chat. And remember, I cannot emphasize this enough. It is just a goal. It is just a target point, because without a target, we can't create a plan. Otherwise, it's just this big nebulous thing of like, I'm writing this book, but we can't put together a step-by-step formula to do it if we don't know where we're going. And I will share with you that my book, the Publisher Purpose book, my goal was 35,000 words. It is 68,000 words. So you can see how quickly that changes. Because when I was writing it, my intention was to keep it short, sweet, accessible. How do I get this information to people's hands? But I wasn't able to pull apart the ways in which it all had to come together. Because part 1 is mindset, part 2 is writing, and part 3 is publishing. And I wasn't able to kind of just remove the mindset from the other 2 things, because without the right mindset, without knowing what your goals are, without knowing what your accountability systems are going to look like, it was all kind of a little bit different. So mine ended up being double what my intention was, and it's okay. And so instead, to accommodate for that, I made sure that the physical reading experience was accessible as possible. So there's a lot of space, there's a lot of kind of call out quotes, things to make it feel like an easier read. And you can kind of pick it up and put it down and pick different chapters without necessarily having to have all the context from the chapter before. 90,000 memoir. I'm at 65,000 words so far. Yep, chunking out an hour a day. Oh, Melanie, you know where we're going with this then. So this is where we're headed. Okay, so we have Ashley saying 333 pages. I love that. Anyone else want to put in either page number, word count? Ideally, word count, of course. Yeah, Melanie, because you have my book, right? Yes. Yep, perfect. I love it. It's like almost like you're a plant, but you're not. Okay, so it seems easier for me to go by pages for some reason. Okay, we're going to get into that momentarily. Melissa, you have a question?
So this is like an example of like how much I want my affirmation book to be, because it's an affirmation book. So obviously I don't want it like a book.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give an example, like I have this one, but it's kind of small,
Mm-hmm.
like it's like really little.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I think this is more, like the thickness that I want it to be. And this is only 84 pages. So just an example.
Mm-hmm. And it's great to have some kind of inspiration for what you're thinking about doing. And if you have an example, I see, Sherry, you're asking about children's books. Nikki, I don't know if you can try to see if you can find that answer quickly. I don't know it off the top of my head of how many words are on a children's book page, but for some reason, I'm thinking 30. We're not children's books experts by any stretch of the imagination. But I feel like I've seen 30 before. So Sherry, yours might be a little bit different because it's because of the children's book nature of it. Okay, so grab some inspiration And here's what you can do, as much of a pain it is, Melissa, is look at that book, find the book that has the densest amount of words on it and physically count them. And then take that number and multiply it by the 80 something pages that you mentioned. And then that'll give you an idea of how long it is. It's more manual, but it does the job. Because on average, the numbers are based on about 250 words a page for like a 5.5 by 8.5 or a 6 by 9. That's kind of where the numbers are coming from. In this case, because it's bigger, like the dimensions are a little bit bigger, it might be more words up per page. So I just picked the biggest number, or you can pick the biggest number and the shortest number and then come with the average. Either way, I think you'll be in good shape to have at least, again, just a general direction. And remember, mine was double my intention. So like it happens. Sometimes it comes in a lot smaller than we expect. My experience is that a lot of times it comes in a lot bigger than we think it's going to. And then there's a lot of editing required to remove the extraneous information. Readers do not want you to be repetitive. So if you set a goal for 40,000 words and you are feeling very complete at 30, do not repeat yourself to just fill up a goal of 10,000 more words. It's much more harmful than it is helpful. Okay, step 3. What font size do you suggest? It usually ends up, this is based on about 11 point. Everything, there's so many variables here, so many variables. It depends on margin sizes. So there's a gutter margin, which is kind of like the margin that's like in the inside of the book. And then there's the outer margins, which is kind of like the outside of the page book. So this is a lot of variables, but for this purpose, we're just trying to get ourselves in a place of having a goal and a direction that we can head in. So our target length, I'm going to use the example is 40,000 words because I want easy math. So, and we as a kind of a company and just in conversations that we have a lot is, especially for nonfiction, shorter tends to be better because we have no attention span. I know I mentioned it, lack of attention spans at least one other day this week. We just have very short attention spans. And so we want to be concise with our message for our readers. And so I think 35,000 tends to be a great size because it's about 150 pages, 40,000 closer to 200 pages. That, like, once we start getting over that, that's where I think we start to lose people, because people even just picking up the book, if they see the size of it and they're immediately afraid because it just seems really overwhelming, they're either not going to buy it or they might have it, but they're not going to read it. And that's not going to help them get the transformation that you're hoping for. So I tend to err on the shorter, the better. That does not mean that you can actually succeed in making it a really short book. Like, just some topics just really do need that amount of space to really adequately cover what you're trying to say. So step 3, at this point, we should have have our number, right? So you should have how many words you can write in an hour and what your goal is. Those are the 2 numbers that you should have sitting in front of you. Melanie, what if I want to add screenshots of documents? Yes. So I feel like the better way to do it, if we think about reader engagement. So the question is, like, should I include documents, screenshots, graphs, charts, things like that inside the book, or should I put them on a website and get them out of the book? The best way to do it, if it is imperative that the reader see some type of data point, you need to include it, because not every reader is going to leave the book and go find that additional information. So if it's imperative, keep it in the book itself. If it is more of a nice to have, more of just kind of an enhancement, you can put it on your website. And the benefit of doing that is that you can say to the reader in the book itself, for, additional information for a full color version of this chart, please visit, put a QR code in, put a link in, and send them over to wherever they want to go. So you can kind of do both. So I would just say if it's imperative to put it in there, I would. And then an editor will help you determine what absolutely needs to be there and doesn't. So if you're not 100% yet, you can just kind of make a note for the editor in the document and then come back to it at a later date. Okay, so we're writing this number down in the workbook. We're writing on a piece of paper, wherever we're writing it. All right, step 4. I'm going to do a little bit of division. Again, none of this is complicated. I just want to go slow and steady so it's clean and clear. So basically what we're going to do is divide the number of words that we can write in an hour by whatever our goal is. So if we're using the example, we have 1,000 words per hour, 40,000 words. So that is going to translate, in the example's case, to 40 writing sessions that are about an hour each. So that's 40 hours of writing in total to get to this end goal. So I'm going to give you a moment to just do the math of that. And please drop it into the comments while we're going through. Let me know if you are following, if this is all making sense. Had a 14 to 15 hours. See, how does that feel? Just knowing that number, how does that part of this feel?
Doable.
That is the goal. We want this.
This makes it sound so easy, Jen.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot more to it because you have to have the commitment, the routine, the accountability to actually sit and do it.
Yeah, but thinking of like, can I find 41-hour chunks of time over some span of time rather than can I sit down and write 40,000 words is like, like you said, like it's a mindset thing, but it makes it so much more attainable.
Yep, it's just shifting our perception of how to accomplish this. And we're going to take it one step further in the next 2 steps. 26 hours, great way to help structure the process. This is a SMART goal, so easy to achieve it. Yeah, and when I was talking about before about how my book ended up being double the size, I have a whole chapter about goals, and I use SMART goals as an example. And so to like really make sure that we have the right goal in place for both what we want the book to do, but then also how we want to approach it. And this is really just kind of the writing process. This does not count the editing process, which is a whole other can of worms, or if you're just kind of doing research, right? So some of your topics might require a lot more research than other topics. Some require no research. A lot of times we might be going for a walk, we're, doing some kind of activity, and we have these ideas that pop in our head and we're like, oh, I got to write that down somewhere because I don't want to lose it next time I have a writing session scheduled. So like all of those things are kind of in addition to, but the actual physical act of clicky clacking at the keyboard is really what we're going for here. So I'm happy that we're already feeling doable. Melanie's saying 24 more hours. I think that's perfect. So we're writing this number down. We're going to move on to step 5, which is determining how quickly we want to have this written. This is a big variable to this process. What is your timeline? What is driving your goal to get this done? So if we look at what reasonable timelines are, when you see advertising that says write a book in a weekend, the chances are that is not going to be a high quality, good reflection of you if you are cranking through it in a single weekend. It doesn't give you the time or the space to just think about what you want to do. You're just more of like massive data dump, put all the words down in paper mode, which might be your process and might be your style and might work for you. But for what we've noticed, it really does take a little bit of time. You might want to do some kind of write a book in 30 days type of scenario. We have a 30-day writing challenge, which we can drop in the chat as well. That is just 30 days of kind of tips and writing prompts and ideas of just to be able to kind of get as many down on paper as you can. Hadi, you have a question?
I do.
Yes.
So I think part of what's going to drive how quickly I want it is how much more time is like it's going to be, I guess, what else needs to happen after I write it. So it's like, if I write it in 30 days and then it takes another year before it's published, I guess that is important for me to know, because I would like to do it before the end of the year, but like, I don't know if that's doable because I don't know how much time the rest of it is going to take.
That is a great question and great context for everybody. So publishing timelines, depending on that path that you go down. So if you're going down a traditional publishing path, you are at least 2 years away from publishing your book, if not longer. That's if you can get an agent to say yes, they shop it around, you get a deal, etc. So that's a whole different kind of can of worms. But if we're looking at the context of hybrid publishing and self-publishing, you're looking at about 6 months. That's probably the best 6-ish months or so. And that's inclusive of the editing process, the design, what the inside looks like, getting your book description, all of the kind of the cover, if I didn't already say that, like all of those pieces. So I would say 6 months is a good average. So if you're saying, I want to have this out by the end of the year, you can back in 6 months, which means you really have to have it done, being written by the beginning of June to be able to have it out in December. The question that this brings up is timing for everyone's book individually. This year in the United States, there's a presidential election that is going to be very loud and noisy, not that it already isn't. And that is going to definitely have an impact on books that are being published in the fall this year. So for us as a company, we're trying to advise our authors to either get it out before October 2nd or wait until after like the first week of December to just kind of eliminate all of getting caught up in the clutter of those conversations. Nonfiction books and memoirs, I think, have much more flexibility. Nonfiction books do best in spring and fall. And it's really kind of like September, October, and then February, March, April, May. Those are kind of like the big months that we have a lot of books, especially in the spring. We have a lot of books that are just kind of coming out back to back to back to back in the spring and fall. Because you don't want to get caught in, it's August, people are in vacation mode, they're in summer mode, they're not trying to solve a problem with their nonfiction, with your nonfiction book. Memoirs, on the other hand, those are something that you can definitely kind of plan promotions around, depending, because it's, it's still a story. Fiction books, children's books, I don't think apply nearly as much to these kind of parameters of seasons as the nonfiction books do. But 6 months is a good average. And this is for writing. So we like to just kind of put out as a 6-month option, because 6 months you can do something very strategic. You can be very intentional about it. You can take your time without rushing yourself, without, and again, tomorrow we'll talk about contingency plans and things, but inevitably something will come up while you're doing this. It is never a clean, easy path. And so giving yourself at least a 6-month window of time gives you options for those things to come up. There's sickness, there's some kind of problem, there's some kind of chaos that occurs for whatever reason. You're able to not be like, oh my God, I'm not going to meet my timeline. I'm not going to meet this deadline because I didn't give myself any buffer space. Our writing program, our writing intensive program, is also a 6-month process. And we know that you can get a manuscript written without having a single word on the paper by the end of a 6-month process. So there is absolutely, we have a lot, which is proven data that shows that this works. So we're going to write this number down in the workbook. So whatever your number is, I would say 6 months is probably a good minimum. For some people, you're like, you know what? It's an idea. It's not quite a priority yet. I got to kind of figure out where this might fit. I have a 8th book idea that I'm noodling on currently. And I'm thinking my birthday is on the 26th. And I was like, oh, it could be fun to have my book, my last, not my last, Lord knows it won't be my last, but my next on 6/26/26, because it just sounds fun. Is there any, it is completely arbitrary, but it just sounds like it'd be fun. So for me, that would be the timeline I'm using, is like, okay, if I want to launch it in June of 2026, then I would want to be starting the publishing process in the fall of 2025, which would give me between now and next fall to actually get it written. Because I've already written 7 other books. I'm in no particular rush here. But for others, when we're working on a book like this book, the Publisher Purpose book, I sat on that and I actually talk about the journey of it in the preface or introduction of, I had the idea every July. I come around like, oh, I want to do this. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I want to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. No, I want to do it. And like, I just stopped and started. And then finally it became like such a pressing need to have this information in the book for people that finally that's the thing that just like kicked me to be in the right direction to get this done. So you might have a very clear reason and you may not. And either way is perfectly fine, because again, it's just giving you a framework and a plan to work towards, even if you change it or modify it in 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. It's just for planning purposes. We don't need to be held to any of these things super aggressively, because anytime we put too many restrictions around what we're doing when it comes to the writing process, because there's so much creativity involved, a lot of times it has an adverse impact because that restriction just kind of like blocks the flow of our creativity. All right, so step 6, we're rounding it all out together. This is all going to come together for us. So now we are going to take the length of time and or writing sessions, however we're defining this. In this case example, we're saying 6 months. We're going to divide that into our writing sessions. And we're going to come up with this number that's going to tell us approximately how many hours in a given month do I need to be working on this to meet this goal. And this example tells me it's about 7 hours a month over a 6-month period of time. That is going to be what gets me to my goal of writing 40,000 words in a 6-month period based on 1,000 words per hour. We can go one step further if you're like, that's not enough structure, like 7 hours in a month. Like, how do I figure out how to do that? This is what this looks like. 222 words a day for 180 days. I know for a fact that I probably write 100 times that amount just in texting back and forth with people throughout the day. And it's probably way more than that if I look at my emails, how many words I put into a single email in any given day. So we have to think about how is our brain personally wired for this to make sense? For some of you, coming up with some kind of word count per day will work. For others, it's kind of like a binging type of situation. Like, so some people are very like consistent where it's like, all right, I know exactly what I want to do. I'm just going to keep plugging it away every single day, have the ability to kind of just follow that really structured plan. Other people are much more kind of all over the place, where all of a sudden you'll crank out 4,000 words and then you'll sit on it for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden you come out with 3,000 words and then you sit on it for a couple of weeks. So it's definitely a matter of trying to find your groove and your rhythm as you go through, and you will start to see trends and patterns and things that end up working for you over time. We have somebody that's in one of our writing programs right now, and she has a 4-year-old and happened to be at some like trampoline park type of chaos and was able to, I think she wrote like 4,000 words sitting in a loud, crazy trampoline park with children screaming in all directions. And when we were asking her, like, well, what do you think it is about, like, why do you think you were able to focus in that environment? And she was saying that she went back to when she was writing papers in college, that she would always do it in the student union where it was just chaos in all directions around her. So for her, writing in a chaotic environment actually is what worked for her. For me, that would absolutely not work in any way, shape, or form. I like to write when I'm flying, and I like to write in coffee shops that are not super crowded and have some kind of ambient noise in the background. There's one right near my house that I still really enjoy that has like jazz music that kind of just plays in the background. It's just very calming. It's very soothing. There's no words. I don't have to worry about getting stuck and now I'm singing a song instead of focusing on writing. So everybody's a little bit different. So we have to figure out what works for us, because it's not going to be the same for somebody else. We don't want to get too caught in trying to do what somebody else said worked for them. We can try it. It's all trial and error. And yesterday I had mentioned the progress tracker spreadsheet tool that we use in our programs, and it gives you a place to kind of identify what is working for me, what time of day is working, what location is working for me. Like, I know that a lot of people don't do well writing at their desks. I certainly don't, because when you're at your desk, you're in work mode. It's not creative time, right? Or, you know, and this is where we'll talk about kind of contingency plans and things like that tomorrow. Once I have an outline, I can write. Yeah, outlining is a fantastic place to start. And even before outlining, you can do a mind map. So focus on creating a mind map first, which is a whole chapter in the book as well. Focus on creating a mind map first. Then that'll give you at least kind of a starting point to figure out how to transfer that into an outline. And then you can keep moving from there. Is this all making sense? Sherry, I think I'll write. Yes. Yeah, that'll be part of your process, right? Where you'll write, check in with somebody, rewrite, come back and write. Like, and it's just so interesting to see how many different ways that this can work. So in our writing program, the 6-month writing program I was mentioning, it is so interesting to see how different people approach things. So in that program, everyone gets their submits pages, like submits, 1,500 words, and their peers review them. And so it's recorded. It's a lot, like a really kind of like deep dive of like, here's what I would do different. Here's I feel like I need a little more story here. You're giving me too much information. This is TMI, like just all different things. And some people will not touch a single word of anything anyone has suggested until the program is over. And other people will immediately make those edits and changes because it's fresh in their mind and they want to do it right now while they're still thinking of it. Even though they have the recording, they can go back and do it later. They have the document that's all marked up and edited and everyone's notes are in it. But like, that's where we want to just be mindful of not forcing a process that doesn't work for us on ourselves, because that's where we get stuck. Like for me, I'm more of a let me fix it in real time because I have like new ideas that might have come up while I was getting that feedback. But for others, they want to do it later because it's just you can compartmentalize it a little bit differently because there's like your writing process, then there's your self-editing process, and then there's actually working with a professional editor. And those are 3 kind of different layers to the equation. I have to talk about it as like an ice sculpture. If we think about how ice sculptures are created, like they had to start from water somewhere. And that water had to be frozen and it had to be a big heap of ice. It's not like it came out looking like a beautiful koi fish. It was just a heap of ice at some point. And so when we're thinking about that, we can't be focusing on the finer details of a scale on it when we have no shape to it. You know, you can't be like, let me carve this beautiful fish eye and it's a blob of ice, right? Like it has to go through pass by pass by pass to eventually start to take shape and start to create that detail. It's the same idea with writing a book. Like at first, it really is just a blob of words that may or may not make sense. And the more times you go back through it with intentionality and different lenses and different ways to look at it, you're able to kind of eventually get it to a place where it makes more sense. So the thing that is in the workbook that I encourage you to utilize is this daily word count declaration. And it's basically just putting in everything that you just wrote down into a document where you can put it somewhere where you can see it. We've had people put it in we had someone laminate it and put it on their kitchen fridge. We've had people put it in the visor of their car, on the bathroom mirror, on their desk. So, you know, in some kind of planner journal type of thing, taking a picture of it and just keeping it on your phone, making it your phone background. It sounds almost ridiculous, but for some people, this works. It is just that reminder of like, oh, that's right. I made this commitment to doing this thing. And this is my ongoing reminder to myself that I'm going to do this thing. Because again, without the right support structures in place, it is very easy for this vision to just fall to the wayside because something else took its priority. But if we have this silly document just looming and waiting, like, oh, like it's helping you hold yourself accountable. Another way to hold yourself accountable is to go to friends, family, social media, your newsletter, whatever it happens to be, and just flat out tell people that you're writing a book, which I know scares the absolute bejesus out of people. Actually, we got an email yesterday from someone who read the book and was providing, like just basically saying like, this is what my vision is for it. Hold on, Nikki. I completely blanked on what I was going to say about her. Hold on. Hate when that happens. It's like my brain
I'm usually good at reading your mind.
I know. Oh, trying to think because she emailed, what was she saying? It was such a beautiful email too. I can't remember. It was something about her making, I got it. Was that she wrote, her PS was, I'm still hesitant to put in my email signature that I'm writing a book. So like she saw that because I think it's like literally in chapter 1 that's like, go to the social media, blame me. I don't care. Like blame us as a company, blame me personally. Just go tell people that you're writing a book. And then one of the tips is like, put it in your email signature. And she was hesitant in it. Of course, I responded back saying, I think your email signature would look beautiful if there was a coming soon about my book. But it's those things that help keep us accountable because now other people are expecting something from us. And for some of us, we need that. For others, we're perfectly fine holding ourselves internally accountable. So again, it's just kind of picking which tool makes sense for you. Everyone following, everything feeling good. All of this is making sense. Love it. All right. What questions do we have? I'm going to share a little bit more about our weekly writing group. If anyone is interested in participating in it, you are absolutely welcome to. We'll drop a link in the chat for that. And while I'm doing that, please throw your kind of questions in the chat, or we can, put your hand up and unmute. I'll just do this pretty quickly because I know inevitably more questions kind of arise as we keep kind of going through this process. There is no homework for tomorrow. You are going to have a lot to do tomorrow though. So be prepared. All right, so I'm going to skip past some of this that we were talking about yesterday. So those who were with us yesterday. So part of what we include is, again, this is a weekly writing group to help you just have that accountability that we all know that some of us need. Again, not everybody who needs it, but a lot of people just really need that accountability. So there's some sample outlines that are included. There's weekly writing prompts for those of us who just are kind of getting stuck in the creativity space. And we have nonfiction writing prompts and memoir writing prompts. So they're like a little bit different, kind of depending on what you're working on. And that progress tracker spreadsheet that I mentioned that we've just recently revamped, that is a thing of beauty, in my opinion. I am using it for myself and I am loving every minute of it, because we have pie charts in it now that kind of give you data on, am I working really well in the morning or am I working really well at night? Like, you might not know, but your productivity will show with how many words you've actually put on the page. So it's kind of cool to see in real time. For some people, having data points like this doesn't matter. For some of you, you might be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Again, a lot of this is kind of a choose your own adventure. So we know that accountability, as I've been talking about already, comes in just different kind of forms and fashions. So our Promote Your Purpose PDF is a combination of a lot of tips and guidance that are in the book itself. But this is more for the accountability side of things, like putting it in your email signature, posting it on social media, putting it in your LinkedIn saying, you know, author of, and putting in your tentative book title. Doesn't mean it's going to be the book title that ends up what it is. Just put it there, because it's going to make people ask you, oh, tell me more about your book. Little side story. So we have, I was just at the B Corp Champions Retreat a couple weeks ago in Vancouver, which is a business conference for like socially conscious businesses. And I'm hanging out with one of our authors who went through our 6-month writing program. And I gave her this magnet. Oh, you can't, I don't think you can see it in my screen behind me. But I have this magnet that says, ask me about my book on it. And I was like, I really think that you should wear this around the conference. And it is big, like it is like a big, like a business card sized magnet. And we give it to all of our students and the authors that we work with, because again, it creates that accountability. And she was like, oh, I don't think I can do it. I was like, but maybe you can. And so she and I were negotiating, sitting at a bar. And so she puts it on the bar and she's like, all right, like, I'll think about it, but I don't think I'm ready yet and comfortable yet to talk about it. I was like, that's fine. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna really peer pressure you, although I am gonna push you out of your comfort zone. And so as we're sitting there, we're like, because again, we're sitting at a bar, a woman comes walking by and happens to see the ask me about my book magnet sitting right in front of her. And she's like, oh my God, tell me about your book. And so now she's put immediately on the spot to have to explain to a complete stranger about her book idea that she had only been talking about internally in our group of 6 people, as well as with very close friends and family. And so now she's telling a random stranger at the bar about her book. And she wasn't even wearing it. It was just sitting in front of her. And what she was like, oh my God, that was so uncomfortable. And I was like, yes, but it is going to be it's going to be more comfortable the more times this happens. So it's just little things like that force us out of our comfort zone, that feels so scary, that can be really, really effective. And the mug that's sitting behind my screen, I gave that to one of our authors at a different conference, and she was absolutely petrified. And it's such like, I sadistically got a little bit of joy about how like nervous she was, but she carried that mug around. She had to ask me about my book pin, and everybody was asking her. And by the end of the conference, she had said like her confidence just like boosted so much, because it gave her practice talking about her book. So however you decide to go about doing this, try to seek those abilities to get more support as much as you can. I mentioned Scrivener yesterday, and that's the writing program. So we can drop that link in the chat again. I cannot emphasize this enough. We do have tutorial videos though, because again, it's a little bit of a nightmare to learn, but once you do, you are in great shape. And then the other thing that we like to include are actually 2 copies of my memoir and my last nonfiction book that I wrote back in 2017. And the reason for that is that both of them, they're not unconventional at all, but I did some creative things and thought through different ways to approach framing the books, to give as examples to other people of like, hey, our books don't have to fit this mold. They don't have to fit this boring, black and white, stodgy, very standard, looks like it was published in, the 1600s type of font. Like, we can be creative and we can tell stories differently that will engage our readers. So it's just kind of give as, just more examples if that is helpful, because that is always the goal. And then the weekly agenda, I'll just share quickly, is welcoming and introductions, very similar to kind of how we're doing it. Nikki is running this, goal setting, sharing the intentions, and then just having a distraction-free zone. So keeping your camera on, turning it off does not matter, whichever your preference is, but sitting and actually doing the writing. So if we're thinking about how do I bucket in the 40 hours of writing sessions, it could easily be doing this in combination with something else, right? And again, you might just be more of a binge writer where you just write 4,000 words at a clip, but you might only need to do it a couple of times and be in good shape. So again, they're on Thursdays at 11 Eastern time, and then the weekly, and then the office hours are on Thursdays at noon Eastern. So just one time a month, you can kind of roll right from the writing right into that kind of open office hours where you can ask all the questions that are inevitably coming up. Because as you can see, even by some of the questions that we've been getting here today, like there's so much on the publishing side that is relevant to the writing side. So, you know, sometimes we want to keep those things in silos, and the more you know now, the better and easier the flow of the process will be a little bit later for you. And that's why the book ended up being 3 parts and 70,000 words, because I wasn't able to to unpack those things separately. They really do just have to go hand in hand together. I couldn't find another way. I was like, all right, she's just going to be a little bigger than I expected. She's got a little meat on her bones, but it's effective, and it's still written in a way that just feels accessible for you. And Nikki, if you want to drop the link again for the book giveaway, since we're talking so much about it. What questions do we have? Yeah, Melanie, I'm happy that you, this has been great. And I know you already worked your way through the book, which is fantastic. But what questions are kind of lingering for anybody, whether it's related to this, completely unrelated, anything in the world of books? I'm happy to kind of noodle on with you. Come on, unmute, throw it in the chat. Might be a quiet day today. If putting a book announcement in an email signature, would it be appropriate to mention pre-orders at which stage of writing? You know what? I skipped right past that bullet point on a slide. So pre-orders, there is a whole strategy around pre-orders. All you need for pre-orders is your title and subtitle, your book cover, and the description of your book. Ideally done by professionals, all 3 of those things. Title and subtitle is critical to make sure you have the right keywords in there, the right phrasing, it has the right tone, it's appealing to your reader. That can change over time though. So you might start off with a title as like a tentative title and then change it later. But for the sake of pre-orders, it's perfectly fine. You can start your pre-orders literally today. Again, hiring an actual cover designer, a professional cover designer, not a graphic designer who might be able to do a cover, but someone who knows how to do book cover design specifically is imperative, because there's an art and a science that is different. And having some kind of functionality where you can collect people's payments. And you want to think about like bonuses. Like, are you going to do like a bundle? Can someone buy a copy of the book and then they also get to do a group session with you? Do you have some kind of other product that you might be able to lump in? Is there some kind of like behind the scenes access to something that you can provide? The sky's the limit. The beautiful thing about pre-orders is you can be vague. Like Melanie, you don't even need a publication date. You can just be super vague. You can say coming in 2025. Leave it vague. Then once you get further in the process, you can say coming spring 2025. Then once you get further in the process again, you can say coming May 2025. Then you can say it's May 3rd, 2025. So you can really narrow it in, and you're taking your reader along the way for you the whole way through. So it's not uncommon to have a very long pre-order period. And the beautiful thing about that is that you can collect the sales and the money in now, which helps you fund the cost of getting it done. But it also holds you accountable, because now you have people's money and you can't not do it. So that's kind of a benefit too. Ashley and then Anthony. Questions? Oh, you're muted. Oh, there you
Hi.
go. Yes.
Hi. So it's funny that you said not a graphic designer that could do a book cover, because I am said graphic designer and people hire me to do graphic design. So writing a book, I'm like, should I just write it in InDesign? And then that way it's already like on its way to being designed. And yeah.
Write it in Word,
So
because editors don't work in InDesign.
Okay. So it's something where it's going back to the very first day where it's like focus on being the writer. Because in my head, like I can be the designer, the publisher, the printer, all of it. So it's just like we just need to focus on writing. I get that. But fast forward the second. if I wanted to do something where I'm involved like heavily in the design and or printing process of my book, when we get to that point, is that something that with your hybrid publishing experience, you've helped authors be in that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because
Okay.
you want to make sure that your input is there. You don't want to just hand over like the whole, especially the design process. Like especially when you have a really clear vision. No, you absolutely want to be in that process as much as possible. But doing it yourself tends to add all kinds of
Yeah.
complication because the amount of times we've had an author say, well, I have a designer who created the cover and then the files aren't formatted right. They're not ready for print format. They're not in the right, like they're in RGB versus the CMY. Like, I mean, it's just like a series of chaos that is avoided when someone knows exactly what a printer is looking for from a book cover file. And then there's also the design
Right.
elements of like how, especially back covers, there's a whole art and science to how back covers should be laid out too. And it's not to say that you might
Mhm.
not be able to do it. However,
Right.
I always err on do not design something in Canva. Like that is not like stay out of Canva. Everybody, like just please when you're doing book covers, because it just creates more problems later. So again, I think Ashley, you've said it a couple times over the last few days, like just focus on being the writer. Everything else is like a future step for you to figure out. Like just focus on writing it now. Everything else you can kind of work through the details of later. And you can find the right collaborative partners who are going to say, yeah, we definitely want you to be part of the print process. And like in our case, like we give our authors as much creative control as they want. Sometimes it's to our own detriment, but we want to make sure that everyone's happy. But whatever someone comes to us with, we want to make sure that it's following industry standard best practices, because otherwise it's not going to sell. We have one book that the content is amazing. Her intention is to create a movement, and I love her so much. And she did not take our advice on the cover, and the book does not sell because the cover is tragic. And I cannot get her to see it differently. And it's like, and we know if the book were different, that it absolutely would fly. I mean, it is such a solid book. And there's no chance because the cover is just so not appealing to people. So that's why we have to really be mindful of not just what we want it to look like, but how do we want it to look in relation to what other books like it look like. Anthony, I know you had a question.
It was on, so good, thanks.
Well, not perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not to, like, I'm trying not to, rain on people's parades when it comes to kind of like the things that orbit the book that you shouldn't focus on. But we've just seen so many things go south when there's good intentions. And, if it coming up with your own cover for the sake of doing pre-orders, if you're okay with that, sometimes it can absolutely harm you because it's not the best representation of you and your brand. And especially if you're writing a book that is tied to a brand, it is imperative that it looks like it's tied to your brand. So whether that's using a complementary color palette, whether it's using similar fonts that you might be using on your website currently, there's a lot that goes into the psychology of making sure it looks like the rest of your marketing materials. And sometimes we don't want it to look like our other stuff, and that's fine, but it has to be an intentional choice for it to not be that way. Otherwise, we want to make sure that there's cohesion. Because like imagine you're standing on a stage, you're having this conversation, like, oh my God, this is amazing. People are like, oh, I have to go get their book. And then they go and they look at it like, wait a minute, this looks nothing like what I was expecting it to be. Or if you're like a really dynamic speaker and a really boring writer, those two things have to be the same. You need to be like a boring speaker and a boring writer, or a dynamic speaker and a dynamic writer. You can't have a mismatch of those things because it throws off the expectations that the reader has of you. Oh, so many things, so many things. Okay, so tomorrow we are coming back for our final day. We're going to talk about support systems. We're going to come up with kind of like, who do we need on our team to surround us? What do we do when something goes completely off the rails and we don't know how to handle it? We'll have just a nice, clean, simple system and process to think about. And then on top of it, we'll have plenty of time for questions tomorrow as well. So just keep noodling on whatever your questions might be, and we will get to them tomorrow. All right, we're in good shape. All right, I love it. Thank you all for being on camera. It genuinely does help. I feel like I'm not talking to a vacuum, so I appreciate it. Hopefully I will see you all tomorrow, and just bring all your questions and we'll get to it. All right, have a great day, everyone.